Let's try again. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, I'll start again. So great to see everybody tonight. I'm Suzanne Hume, Cleaner for Kids. So excited and proud to be here with some of the members of our youth board. We have Judith and Leanna, Janice, and Alice here with us tonight, and we're so glad to have you. So thank you again so much. So I'd like to introduce Janice.
Hi, I'm Janice. I'm on the Cleanup for Kids Youth Board, and I just want to say thank you for joining us today. Feel free to write your ideas, comments, or questions in the chat box below on your screen. As a guest attendee, you are not seen or heard during this panel discussion webinar, but we would like to hear from you in the chat. After our time together, you may stay on the call tonight if you want to talk about your ideas or ask Suzanne or our board questions. Please let us know if you would like to be a future guest on any panel discussions we have. You may also write to us at forkids@cleanerforkids.org. So as I said, I'm Janice, and I'm on Team 4, Water is Life. At cleanerforkids.org, we have 6 teams. Team 1 is Climate Action Plans, Renewable Energy Goals, and Sustainability. Team 2 is Trees, Gardens, Wildlife, and Public Lands. Team 3 is Air Pollution, No Idling, and Transportation. Team 4 is Water and No Fracking. Team 5 is no pesticides and toxic chemicals and no synthetic turf. Team 6 is plastics and pollution and works to protect zero waste. You're welcome to join one of our 6 teams as a student, intern, or volunteer. K-12 students, you may take notes from this panel discussion or work on projects for community service hours. If you're taking notes for community service hours, please remember you need to take 2 full pages of notes plus a summary paragraph. Instructions are on cleanerforkids.org. To learn more about K-12 contests or community service, please go on our Cleaner for Kids website.
To enter our K-12 contests, you can create art, write music, make presentations, do STEM projects, and so much more. Hello, my name is Judith, and I would like to personally invite you to enter our No Idling Sign art contest. I created this No Idling sign that will be printed on a metal sign and will be displayed outside of a school. I hope you can join me and make a no idling sign on paper or even on computer. Take a picture of it and email it to us, and you will be entered in our contest. If your sign is chosen, it will be displayed outside of schools, parks, stores, and other places. Car exhaust is toxic. Did you know that 1 minute of idling has more carbon monoxide than 3 packs of cigarettes? And 1 gallon of gas burned can put more than 20 pounds of carbon, a greenhouse gas, into the atmosphere? This week in the United States, we celebrate Air Quality Awareness Week. The science is clear. Clean air saves lives, reduces health care costs, keeps workers healthy, and improves productivity. The Clean Air Act was passed by the Congress 50 years ago to reduce air pollution, improve our health, and help us live longer, healthier lives. In 2020, the Clean Air Act programs will prevent up to 370,000 premature deaths. Over 20 million people in the United States live in counties with annual fine particle pollution levels above the legal limit. With the U.S. population containing about 330 million people, 122 million are exposed to ground-level ozone air pollution, also known as smog. Harvard researchers identified significantly higher COVID-19 death rates in U.S. counties with even slightly elevated levels of soot air pollution. The study found that a person living for decades near levels of fine particulate matter was 13% more likely to die from the coronavirus. This is because long-term air pollution exposure can lead to deadly acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS. This risk increases with age and severity of illness. Because of these rollbacks, our air quality and health is now at a much greater risk. Air pollution endangers our health and our lives. Now, the EPA is rolling back or taking protections. We are concerned because of the deadly air pollution coming from cars and coal-fired power plants, and the EPA refused to set a stronger fine particle air pollution limit that would help prevent more than 12,500 premature deaths each year. Kevin created a slide showing the deadliest form of air pollution, called fine particulate matter, or soot. This is harmful because these microscopic particles can go deep into our lungs and get into the bloodstream and damage our hearts, lungs, brains, and kidneys. There are short and long-term exposure risks to polluted air and health problems at levels far below the current Clean Air Act limits.
Wow. Well, air pollution is such a concern, and thank you for sharing that information with us, Judith. My name is Leanna, and I'm also a youth board member here at Clean for Kids, and I lead Team 1 for Climate Action Plans, Sustainability, and Renewable Energy. And I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about clean air and so forth and how it relates to a few other things. So if we want clean air and water, we need to stop burning fossil fuels to begin with. When fossil fuels are burned, it creates pollution. And instead of burning fossil fuels, we can invest in renewable energy sources like solar, wind, so many other sources that do not create this pollution. So in spite of all this dark talk about pollution, we actually have some good news. The UC system, also known as the University of California, which encompasses many universities, is investing $1 billion into clean energy projects overall. So that's really great news to hear that such a profound system that has a lot of research ability is putting money into these clean energy projects. As well as just a little update overall about renewable energy. Over 100 million people now live in places that are committed to 100% renewable energy. So some of you may or may not remember I talked about the American Cities Climate Challenge in previous webinar discussions. And this challenge gives about 25 cities the resources and everything that they need to meet these certain standards, these net zero emission standards, and these cities will act as examples and models for other cities to do the same. So this is really good news because not only are people at a local city levels making progress, but they are acting as models for others to do the same, and they're giving the opportunity to do so and show that we can make this shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy and an overall more sustainable lifestyle. Unfortunately, our administration at a federal level is not supporting this. So we need to take collective climate action to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels overall, as it will reduce air pollution, it will improve public health, and avoid the billions of dollars in climate damages to lives, whether that's people being taken away from their homes, or their health is severely impacted, their infrastructure and property and so forth. So an important aspect of this to consider is divestment from fossil fuels. So divestment is the opposite of an investment. So it's taking money out of a system rather than putting it in. And it's this basically how they take these investments out is that they sell them away. And it's a bold statement for any company or individual or trustees that do so. because it's showing that they are committed to making this shift from the fossil fuel industry to renewable energy industries. For example, University of California system I mentioned earlier has divested and sold more than $1 billion worth of fossil fuel assets from its pension and endowment. Because investments in fossil fuels are not only harmful to climate health overall, it's also an unacceptable financial risk because fossil fuels industries and the market is it fluctuates so much. So divestment is not only a smart choice for the environment, it's also a considerably smart financial move. So universities like Yale and MCR and Columbia and a few others they have students making these movements calling for divestment from fossil fuels. And it's just this large campaign that's going across the nation with so many different schools. For example, the UC schools, it's happening across all 10 campuses. And the UC system educates 285,000 students. And it's also known primarily for its research opportunities. So this divestment action is important because not only of the size of its investment, but also the reputation that it will bring as well. So investing in renewable energy and divesting from fossil fuels is so important.
Deanna, this divestment news is really exciting. Are there other universities divesting?
Yes, so as I mentioned, divestment movements have increased overall. For example, Harvard is going in a divestment direction. Georgetown University is committing to doing so by 2030. Stanford is creating their stance on the issue and will make a decision by about next month. And overall, in 2015, actually, the University of California's investments published its framework for sustainable investing that included environmental, social, and governance goals. So, and then now the Board of Regents voted to include these goals in investment decisions. So it's looking pretty promising that a lot more divestment movement will be occurring.
I think you mentioned a fossil-free group. I've heard of Fossil-Free California. What groups are involved in divestment?
So Fossil Fuel California is a part of like a larger organization which seeks to aid other companies, other organizations divest from fossil fuels overall. They will basically, because it's important to transition to low carbon emissions and a low carbon economy. Another group that we're looking for divestment from is CalSTRS, which stands for California State Retirement System. And so a lot of the teachers and students within this organization are urging them to divest from fossil fuels. So we'll keep you posting on that as well.
Thank you so much, Leanna. We need to be informed so we can take action. The title of today's panel discussion is EPA Part 8, Stand Up for Science and Actions We Can Take. Tonight, we will be talking about rollbacks, which are undoings of protections for our water, air, or lands, and actions we can take. So let's go to the New York Times article, which can be found on our website, cleanerforkids.org, to see the list of 98 rollbacks for our water, air, and public lands. We can then go to and see the Columbia tracker. Please look at all of these protections taken away for water, clean air, and public lands. We would like to shout out Natalie, fellow at Sebin Center of Columbia University Law School in New York, New York. Thank you for meeting with us earlier this week. We appreciate your support and friendship. We also use the Harvard University Tracker as another source of information about rollbacks or loss of protections and to find out what is currently happening.
Thank you, Janice, for sharing that information. So I briefly just want to discuss this a concept that we are looking into, and it's a rollback challenge. So essentially, this rollback challenge would have a student or anybody select a rollback or protection being taken away, and call it out so that they state why the rollback harms our water, our air, public lands, health, national parks, or wildlife, whatever it encompasses, and then explain why this rollback is important through some type of art form, whether it's 2D art, 3D art, music, videos, and any other media, for example. And these rollbacks are occurring during COVID-19, such a vulnerable time, and it's important that we speak up against it. I mean, earlier this week, over 70,000 people wrote to the EPA asking them to stand up for science and to not let these attacks on science occur.
So
Can you tell us about the EPA unjust rules strengthening transparency in regulatory science?
Yes, I would love to talk about it. So the EPA rule that's being proposed is, like you said, Alice, the strengthening transparency in regulatory science, which it would restrict the EPA, also the Environmental Protection Agency, to rely only on scientific research for which the underlying data would, whether it be medical records, raw data from any of the experiments hosted, as long as that data was made public. So it would require these scientists to disclose all of their raw data, including confidential medical records, which cannot happen because of privacy laws. And so before the agency would consider these studies, these academic study conclusions, they would have to rule it out because certain confidential medical records weren't released. So this rule would essentially wipe out really important statistics, leaving many people and their stories and their health experiences unaccounted for when making these decisions.
Is there anything else?
Well, it would also limit access to epidemiological and public health studies when making these policies or fighting unjust policies that harm our health. So the EPA wouldn't be able to consider these studies when they are making policies or trying to fight unjust policies and so forth.
Is this retroactive?
Yes, it is retroactive, and the effect will be harming our public health. I mean, the current administration is seeking to censor scientific research and ignore key public health studies. So I personally don't believe that is transparency in science at all. So we ask that the EPA not limit the scientific and medical research that the government can use to determine these public health regulations. We need this science to protect our family's health, our own health, our children's health, and so forth. I mean, Trump's Environmental Protection Agency undermines life-saving science is a dangerous proposal. So this kind of ties into the current COVID-19 pandemic, as the EPA is led by Wheeler, who is trying to cover a public health emergency to undermine life-saving science. This is ultimately to benefit polluters like coal plants, pesticide manufacturers, oil companies, tobacco companies. The list goes on, because if they can't take away the data and records from people who have died from toxic pesticides and chemicals, and they can erase their information, then the public will not know how dangerous their product is to others, and they will therefore benefit. So this censored science proposal is not only immoral, it's unethical, and it is completely dangerous to public health overall, and as well as policies that are making. It is also really strongly opposed by mainstream scientific organizations because it prevents important, relevant, peer-reviewed public health research from being considered. So, for example, the EPA sets pollution standards that saves lives. This would be taken away because the data there to support these pollution standards would be stripped, because they weren't allowed to release this data, this really important data, because of private medical reasons. The EPA would not be allowed to show vital epidemiological research showing how secondhand smoke, cigarette smoke, causes cancer. This would put our children at risk and our health at risk, and is honestly just criminal at this point. So basically, if someone dies or is hurt because they've been poisoned by, say, a toxic chemical, the public has the right to know. but this is stripped away through this transparency rule, essentially. And the person who has been poisoned also has the right to be counted. But just because they're public records, they don't want to share their private medical records, it shouldn't mean that they shouldn't be counted as well. So this new rule is basically retroactively applying to public health regulations that are already in place as well. So the fact that this is even called a transparency law is honestly astounding to me, because the administration is basically taking an aim at public health studies conducted outside of the government that could justify tightening regulations on things like smog, mercury, lead in paint, a bunch of other threats to human health. And it's honestly just crazy to me. It also would require the access to the raw data for every single study that they would consider. So that can be pretty hefty as well.
Wow. So important. Thank you so much. And as someone who has suffered let's try again. So let me say, as you guys, many of you know, I was poisoned by pesticides and had to leave my home. I couldn't speak. It burned my lungs, and I was completely devastated, and still recovering. And so this so-called transparency rule is really difficult to take, because it's so important that people that have suffered these kinds of environmental justice situations, whether they're living next to a field where pesticides are used, or they live next to a factory, or they are, exposed to PFAs or PFAS, like Janice is going to talk about, and Alice, and all of these people that study all of this so much and fight for us. Anyway, it's just so awful. But I was reassured when you said, and I know as well, that over 70,000 people wrote in because they cared. And so we have to all stand up and think about what we can do to take action and move forward. So, the youth board is just so amazingly impressive, and great work sharing your information. You can continuously astound all of us. And I know Monday, when Columbia University was on the phone, they were blown away with you as well. You guys are in high school. So congrats with all that you're doing. You continue to just amaze us. And we're so excited to be able to, later this will be shown, and people will be learning, more people will be learning from your important information. So thank you again so much. Definitely. That is just absolutely so important. Alice, I know you were going to say something. I think you were going to say something. Did you say something?
Oh, sorry. My internet connection was just a bit unstable.
Oh, that's
sorry.
Okay. That's all right. Would you like to share your ideas and thoughts about what you've heard?
Oh, yeah. So I'm a little new to this organization, and I've never really heard about these things before, but this is really important, and I do think that it's great that you guys are allowing high school students to conduct this research and to talk about it, because it just provides such a wonderful platform for information to be shared, information to be spread, and just for everyone to educate themselves about what our community faces.
Yes, for sure. And we would like to give you a big shout out for stepping in for Gabby, who unfortunately isn't with us right now. And we're very interested in you joining our youth board. And so thank you so much for being here tonight and learning all of this important stuff on the fly. Very impressive indeed. Leanna, else were you going to say?
Actually, I had a question.
Oh.
So you were talking about how this new proposal will require access from the raw data and would exclude thousands of people from the public health and epidemiology studies. So wouldn't this be costly for the EPA?
Yes, I was actually just going to talk about that. So when we're bringing the cost factor into this, it's really important, because if the academics were to turn over the raw data to be made available for public review, the EPA would have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to redact this private information, just according to just one estimate. And so this rule was proposed, as we hear, of new research that shows long-term exposure to air pollution, which would cause diseases and weaken their respiratory system's ability to fight infections. How this exposure to air pollution is associated with significantly higher death rates from COVID-19 in the United States. So hearing of this new research and as well as this rule, there is definitely suspicion of a direct connection. The administration claims that this latest executive order will help the country recover economically from the pandemic. But according to a 2017 report from its own U.S. Office of Management and Budget, regulations actually yield economic benefits. And if anything, this new rule, like I said, would cost the EPA hundreds of millions of dollars, which shouldn't be going towards trying to deregulate and causes transparency in science, but should be going towards regulations to, create cleaner air and cleaner water for us humans and wildlife and so forth. Going off that report again, the report also concluded that for every dollar spent complying with major safeguards, the public reaped between $2 and $12 in annual benefits. So as lives were saved and improved health and safety occurred, there was also economic benefits for the public as well. And so while these EPA protections in particular are costly, some of them might also yield high benefits, up to actually $700.7 billion, I think it was, annually. So this outweighs any cost that might have been discussed earlier in terms of why we should be putting this money towards EPA related things and not necessarily limiting science.
Thank you for sharing, Leanna. This is really important.
No worries. This is the time. Now is not the time to play these games with critical scientific research used to protect us from pollution, climate change, or it's not the time to enable arbitrary censorship of specific scientific studies based on a set of weak, vague, and inconsistent criteria. So a prime example, honestly, of this would be about toxic pollution that would involve things like mercury, which I know that Janice and Judith were actually going to talk about. So as I pass the baton on to you guys, if you guys want to discuss mercury and its harmful effects, Janice and Judith.
Of course. So, Judith, as we've seen in your artwork says that mercury hurts brains. I see you've drawn a picture of a coal power plant with smoke coming out of it emitting mercury. You also have a picture of fish showing that mercury can get into fish and then it becomes toxic if we eat the fish. So, Judith, obviously your art is telling us that this rollback is a very bad thing. With that being said, can you please explain, Matt, and why it's so heartbreaking that this is rolled back?
MAT stands for
Uh-oh.
Seems like we lost Judith.
It does. Let's let her know that we've lost her. Judith, I'm going to go like this. Judith, we've lost you, sweetheart.
from mercury and
There we go.
toxics from burning fossil fuels at power plants. Finally, in 2012, after decades, the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, finally passed Mercury and Air Toxic Standards, or MATS, which made sure that power plants seriously reduced mercury and other air pollution that was coming out of power plants. Mercury and air pollution causes breathing problems, heart diseases, and cancer, and other illnesses.
Wow, Matt sounds really important. Do you know how many lives each year it saved?
Yes, the Mercury and Air Toxic Standards is said to save up to 11,000 lives, along with $90 billion each year.
Whoa. Do you know what were the goals of MATS?
The goals of MATS was to force the owners of these coal power plants to update them with better technology to reduce air pollution. If they don't update them, the coal power plants were supposed to be shut down.
Was MATS the first time mercury emissions from power plants had been regulated?
Yes, MATS was the very first regulation of toxic mercury emissions from power plants by the federal government.
What do you mean that power plants were regulated by the federal government?
The mercury rollback, or undoing of a protection, means that every single coal power plant in the United States had to follow this environmental protection, allowing mercury to get into our air and water, harming kids' brains and making our fish sick with mercury poisoning. This is why stopping mercury and the other air pollutants is important for public health.
So why didn't the people who owned the coal power plants reduce the amount of mercury and air pollution going into the air in the first place?
Because to reduce mercury, you must do certain things at a power plant. You must change the fuel that you use or add a scrubbing technology to take out the target pollutant.
And what is a target pollutant?
Target pollutant is the pollution you are trying to not include. And when you do, you often reduce other pollutants as a matter of fact, of course, because it's difficult to surgically remove just one.
What else has the EPA done to justify its new position?
First, science shows us how mercury pollution from power plants affects our human health. Andrew Wheeler, a former coal lobbyist who was put in charge of the Environmental Protection Agency by the Trump administration, has completely rolled back the mercury and air toxic standards on April 16, 2020. Andrew Wheeler is increasing the level of pollution through rollbacks, putting the brains of every single one of us at risk.
Wow, thank you for that hefty amount of information. If you haven't seen Dark Waters yet, you must see it. We are trying to get PFAs out of products. You can help us by writing emails and signing petitions. I will share my PFA slideshow with you so you are ready to take action.
And by the way, Judith, that was amazing. That was amazing information. And I have to say, I'm from Missouri, and I was looking at that graph with the MATS, how much that regulation helped reduce the pollution. It was just amazing. So this information is just so incredibly important. And I'm just so grateful for you guys for sharing this. Everyone needs to know. And that's why our rollback challenge, we need to have that go everywhere. And so we actually do have a slide of our updated rollback challenge that Leanna can show us before we hop off the call. But anyway, so yeah, I'm so grateful for all of your work. Thank you guys, and that was incredible. Okay, Janice, I know you're going to talk about PFAS or PFAs. People say it different ways. Okay, I'm ready to hear from you. Go ahead.
It actually says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Whoa, okay, let me figure out why. Thank you so much for letting me do that. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to enable your screen to share, and I apologize for that. So Janice, oh yeah, okay, thank you for rolling with that. Okay, so we'll have to make sure. So I have to make you a co-host, which I'm doing right now, which I should have done earlier, and I apologize. So I'll start again and give you a good introduction. So Janice, can you please tell us what you've learned about PFAs or PFAS as they're called?
Yes.
Okay.
So are you guys able to see my screen?
It's coming up. It'll come up in a minute. It's not up yet. Just start talking.
Okay. So as you guys know, I am on Team 4, which is protecting our waters from no fracking, no drilling, and no oil spills. So today I'm going to be talking about, oh, sorry, everything's shifting.
That's okay. I love the skills. You guys are gaining so many skills, and I just absolutely love it. So you're going to be talking about this because water is life. Water is a human right. So I really appreciate your work, and we're also grateful for our consultant, Dr. Amelie Catalan, our doctor, another consultant as well, Dr. Sarah Jean Royer from Scripps Institute of Oceanography, as well as Jim Wong, Encinitas Environmental Commissioner, and I could go on and on. So go ahead, go, you're on.
Okay, my screen was not loading and it's just loading in. So what I wanted to talk about today is what are PFAs, because many of us have heard the terms, but we don't really, some might not understand what it fully is. Sorry, it's not loading.
No, that's okay. So what we'll do instead is we'll just go ahead and not share the slideshow because since it's not sharing, because we're having a little technology glitch. So we'll just go ahead and have you talk about PFAs. You've learned so much. And so just about.
Can you see it now?
Oh, we can see it now. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about what are used in and why PFAs are bad for the earth, water, people, and land. And also why PFAs are a major problem and how they are a major problem and how it most importantly hurts people and animals. So, as I was saying, PFAs are really harmful, and PFAs stand for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, a group of man-made chemicals in which molecules are a figure chain of carbon atoms surrounded by fluorine atoms. The bond between carbon atoms and fluorine atoms is the strongest bond in nature. And since it is the strongest bond in nature, natural processes that break down many other compounds does not work on PFA compounds. So some products that are made from PFAs are Teflon-coated non-stick pots and pans, Scotchgard stain protector for carpets and clothing, water-resistant Gore-Tex shoes and clothing, sandwich wrapping paper, and also some dental floss, microwave popcorn bags, aqueous firefighting foam, and then here's a wheel of that shows paints have PFAs, can have PFAs in it, shampoo, stain-resistant products, photography, and pesticides. So, due to the fact that natural processes that break down many other compounds doesn't work on PFA compounds, it makes PFA super slippery and resistant to water and grease. Even though some of those things are very useful, they are also very harmful to the environment and our health. Like firefighters who use the foam and then inhale them are prone to health risks. Also, due to the PFAs being water resistant, they find their ways into our drinking water, streams, and oceans. Here are some facts. So 99% of Americans have been found with PFAs in their blood. Even some polar bears in the Arctic Circle have had PFAs in their bloodstreams. For many sea life, PFAs find their way into fish and other sea creatures because it, of course, can get into our oceans. Also, land animals who eat those fish and sea creatures get the PFAs passed to them. Once we eat those animals or drink contaminated water, PFAs then get into our system, which is why the 99% of Americans have PFAs in our blood systems. Scientists have found that chemical compounds like PFOA and PFOS cause risks for cancer, high cholesterol, thyroid and liver diseases, fertility problems, preeclampsia in pregnant women, and development problems with babies and children. So as you can see, this is a major problem.
Thank you so much, Janice, for your presentation on PFAs. So last week we wrote a letter in public comment to the state of California to ask California to label carpets, rugs, and synthetic turf with PFAs as hazardous and to list them as a priority product. Can you tell us why you took this action?
Thank you, Alice. Because some rugs, carpet, and synthetic turf have been known to contain PFAs, we need to take action. PFAs are a health hazard that poisons our waters, landfills, air, and so much more. Used artificial turf is expected to produce 1 to 4 million tons of waste in the next 10 years. There is no actual recycling of synthetic turf in the United States. Synthetic turf fields are replaced every 7 to 10 years. There are 12,000 to 13,000 synthetic turf sports fields currently in the U.S., with 1,200 to 1,500 new installations each year. The average synthetic turf field adds 40,000 pounds of plastic carpet and 400,000 pounds of infill to landfills.
Why should synthetic turf also be listed as hazardous and a priority product along with rugs and carpets?
Well, synthetic turf is outdoor carpet made from the same plastic resin pellets as carpets and rugs. Both carpet and synthetic turf are made using the same processes from similar products, such as polyvinyl chloride, polypropylene, nylon, polyurethane. There are carpet manufacturers who make both carpet and synthetic turf. PFAs are used in the extrusion of plastic yarn for carpet and blades for synthetic turf. While some carpet manufacturers are stopping the use of PFAs, no synthetic turf manufacturers have yet to state that they are stopping the use of PFAs.
I do agree with you that PFAs are hazardous, but what are other countries doing?
Well, the EU lists developmental toxicity levels of lipid metabolism, development of tumors of one or several organs, and immunotoxicity as observed effects in laboratory animals after exposure to several PFAs. The European Union classifies PFAs as a group, and PFAs must be classified as a group in the United States.
If PFAs are over 5,000 chemicals, how hard would it be to test each PFA?
Well, actually, only 0.27% of the over 80,000 chemicals registered in the United States have been studied. The EPA will review a minimum of 20 chemicals at a time, and each has a 7-year deadline. So we need to register PFAs as a group. As I shared, PFAs contaminate our food, our water, and our land. PFAs are made of carbon-fluorine bonds, which are very stable and resistant to environmental degradation. PFAs are called forever chemicals for a reason. Once in the body, they accumulate in the kidneys and livers with a biological half-life of 3 to 8 years. PFAS have been used for over 50 years, and public exposure is widespread. In California, 3,000 water suppliers and 60 systems have detected PFAS. PFAS are found in the blood of 97 to 99 Americans.
Oh, wow. What other health hazards are linked to numerous health risks?
Well, there's kidney disease, endocrine and immune systems, interference with the body's natural hormones, risk to fatal development, development, increased cholesterol levels, and increased risk of some cancers. PFAS exposure takes place through the inhalation, ingestion, and dermal contact. PFAS need to be removed from all products. Our public comment to California was only to list rugs, carpets, and synthetic turf as hazardous, and it's an important step. Synthetic turf can contain PFAS, and falling on synthetic turf can cause turf burns to the skin, which allow a ready portal for PFAS that allows microbial entry.
What about the workers who are making PFAS?
Workers involved in making or processing PFAS and PFAS containing materials are more likely to be exposed than the general population. Workers may be exposed to PFAS by inhaling them, getting them on their skin, swallowing them, but inhaling them is the most likely route for exposure.
Janice, you told us that there were over 5,000 PFAS, and PFAS are used in industrial and commercial applications: carpets, synthetic turf, pesticides, dental floss, microwavable popcorn bags, non-stick pots, pans, aqueous firefighting foam, pizza boxes, manufacturing processes, stain repellents, etc. PFAS are forever chemicals, and we must list them as hazardous. Can you tell me more about PFOA and the PFOs?
PFOA and PFO are still persistent in our environment. Even though they were phased out in 2015 as a part of a lawsuit agreement, horrific details of the effects of PFOAs on workers, people, and animals exposed include cancer, facial deformities, infertility, and death. The chemical giant DuPont had to pay millions as a part of a class action suit after knowingly exposing workers and the public to PFOAs for decades. The chemical giant 3M created PFOA, sold in DuPont, recommending DuPont contain it, not to release it into the environment. Neither 3M or DuPont reported the dangers of PFOAs.
If PFAs are heavily used, who is blocking legislation to ban or regulate PFAs?
Great question. Unfortunately, the American Chemistry Council has lobbied to block PFAs legislation at the state and federal level, spending over $14 million from 2018 to 2019.
Speaking of chemicals, we are working hard to eliminate pesticides in San Diego County and 2 other places. This is very important to our bees. 1 in 3 bites of food is because of our pollinators like bees, moths, birds, and bats. Bees face many challenges. Climate change, habitat loss, and disease all play a role in the rate of colony collapse. Scientific evidence now links the recent dramatic increase in bee deaths to the rise of neonic, short for neonicotinoids, pesticides. Now the most heavily used insecticide in the United States. Neonic can kill bees on contact, and even at very low exposures, can interfere with their ability to navigate, to forage, and to reproduce. Neonics are chemicals that are easily spread through soil and water and can be absorbed by wild plants, making the pollen and nectar poisonous to bees and other pollinators. The world is taking notice. The European Union, for example, voted to ban outdoor uses of 3 major neonics. Also, Canada is moving to restrict its use. But the U.S. Protection Agency under the Trump administration has failed to take action. For Clean Earth for Kids, we are working hard, and we want to shout out organizations such as PANA, Beyond Pesticides, NRDC, and many others who are working hard with states to eliminate man-made synthetic pesticides while pushing major retailers to take neonic products and neonic-treated plants off their shelves. We must build pollinator habitats, end the pollinator crisis before it's too late. On a different note, we would like to send our support to the Navajo Nation that has been hit in, Navajo
No, it's okay,
Nation.
the Navajo Nation, yeah.
That has been hit hard and struggling with COVID-19. Yesterday, it was reported that the American nations of Navajo Nation have had the highest COVID-19 infection rate, surpassing New York City. A special thank you to Doctors Without Borders, who are working with infected indigenous communities to combat the spread of the coronavirus. Doctors Without Borders announced its first ever mission to the United States. They are an international nonprofit founded in Paris, and they constantly risk their lives to help others. A bit unrelated, but just to emphasize their selflessness, their hospital was attacked in an airstrike in Afghanistan. But now they're helping the hard-hit Navajo Nation fighting COVID-19. Sadly, the governor of South Dakota threatened to sue leaders in an attempt to remove tribal COVID-19 checkpoints. Also, the tribal governments haven't received any money of the $8 billion allocated by the CARES Act. These broken promises are heartbreaking. Let's find ways to support the Navajo Nation. The Navajo Health Command Operations Center established the Navajo Nation COVID-19 Relief Fund for donors to donate money to support their medical and community needs. I will post a link in the chat section if anyone is interested in helping out. And I understand that being a climate activist can be very difficult sometimes, especially when we face the hard facts or when we're trying to encourage others to share a passion. Many activists are overwhelmed with anxiety and describe the crisis as terrifying and stressful. Although it is important to fully grasp what we need to change so we can properly advocate for it, it's also nice to feel a sense of hope, to know that progress is being made. To end on a positive note, I would like to bring up a piece of good news that you may or may not have heard of. Scientists have reported that during the pandemic, carbon dioxide emission levels have dropped. They believe it is the largest reduction of CO2 ever recorded. This is important because in quarantine, we are traveling less, eating out less, and buying less merchandise. It's truly fascinating that when we all implement these small changes to our daily lives, it impacts our Earth so significantly. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Yes, thank you so much. You guys, great job tonight. We all learned so much. And so we know there are a few people on the call that we'll welcome. If you would like to stay on the call, the youth are going to do their studying and things. If they'd like, they're welcome to stay on this call because we know the people who would actually be joining us. So you are welcome to stay on this call. So thank you again so much. Excellent job. And so did you guys check out the chat and answer all the questions that needed to be answered? So you can look at that right now and see about the chat if there's anything that pertains to you or that you'd like to answer. So Youth Board, I know we get so busy with that. So again, thank you so much. So we have great things planned for next week, and we'd like to talk about endangered animals. We'd like to host Mike Levin, if not next week, then in the future. We're excited to talk with him about some bills and some things that Al Marasucci, the representative from the 66th District, has done in terms of reducing toxics and setbacks for oil and gas to protect children and others with pre-existing conditions. So many important things and people on the move. So thank you again for everyone for being here. I'd like to definitely give a huge shout out to our fantastic youth board that are here, people that are not on the call right now because they're studying, our fantastic board member, Jay Klopfenstein, John Bottorff, and all of our wonderful consultants. Thank you so much for being here. And all of you, thank you again so much. So I'm going to Youth Board. You are welcome to go study. You can stay on. I'm going to put on the call right now, I'm going to open it up so that the people that have attended can jump on. So the way I do that is I just go and I add them as panelists. So then they can be seen and heard because they've typed stuff in the chat. So, but before I do that, I'd like to give you a chance to say any parting words that you'd like to say for tonight. So Leanna, would you like to start?
I'll just be staying on the call for a little bit as well, just to answer any questions. But thank you guys all for attending. Especially, I feel like this panel was really important. It was really relevant, especially during these times, to talk about these certain rollbacks that are occurring during these really sensitive times. So it's important to stay aware of these as well. And just to thank everyone again for attending.
Okay, thank you so much. Denise, is there anything you'd like to share?
Everyone just stay safe during this COVID-19 pandemic and stay close to your family, and just make sure that you guys participate in trying to shout out these rollbacks and just trying to spread the noise, spread your information about what's happening during this time.
Yes, and I'm very much looking forward to you guys also doing the rollback challenge.
Yep.
So when people go on our website, and we'll share this with Columbia University as well, obviously. So so we'll have Judith's work for example, on next to Matt's Mercury Air Toxic Standards, and then whoever does the little video clip and little movie. Alice, you've done a great job on giving us a movie about greenhouse gases. So anyway, so we can have that information so it's accessible to everybody. So whether it's a 6th grader, an 8th grader, someone at home, an adult, senior, that they can access this information and it's easy for them to see and easy to understand. So I'm excited for that for sure. So Judith, what would you like to say?